the programmability of money comes with a lot of needs for privacy. And that's something that doesn't get discussed in the DeFi space and in the Ethereum ecosystem in general, because you would be able to, if you just get in that mindset, you would be able to come up with a lot of catastrophic scenarios or a lot of dystopic scenarios in which DeFi or everything built upon these money Legos eventually becomes a social credit score system, right? So if you have insurance protocols that are in DeFi, for example, all of your information being on a public ledger can very easily, and this is the example that you yourself used, which is what I'm using it, all your information on chain could be used to assign you a credit score and therefore reinforce at best or at worst and worsen inequality in all areas of life, basically. So how do you see privacy becoming an antidote for that, or being implemented in these to avoid these kind of things?
It would heavily depend on the case, but I do think it is important to, like, for a variety of reasons, to have privacy. And to your point about things like social credit scores and like, not having privacy really easily enables discrimination against certain groups. Like, it really does. And you've seen this time and time again in the history of the US and a bunch of other countries where they would issue loans to certain people and not issue the same loans to, you know, people who have the same income and everything else. They just otherwise would not issue them a loan, whether it's based off what area they were living in or like all sorts of things. And on Twitter Spaces, I recently gave an example where on the TV show It's a Sin, for example, someone was applying for a mortgage and they're asking a bunch of questions like, have you ever gotten an HIV test? Have you ever had sex with a man? Have you ever done like any of these things? Right. And those are like, if it was public record that you had paid for an HIV test, for example, like the fact that, oh, well, that, you know, maybe that person wouldn't have gotten a mortgage, right? Would have disqualified them from getting a mortgage. Right. So it is important to not be able to discriminate using all of these data points on people. And I think that it's easier said than done to simply, like, it's easy to say, oh, well, we just won't discriminate on these things. But like, when you actually go about making sure that you're not doing that, it becomes really, really complicated because you have complicated systems that determine whether or not someone will, for example, get a credit card, right? And in practice, you're going to probably want to make, if you're the issuer of a credit card, you're going to want to lower your risk when you assign credit to people, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to look for ways to abstract that through, I don't know, machine learning or AI or whatever, like, where, you know, on a simple level, you're going to use something like, I mean, you won't use Keras, but you'll probably use something like Keras, where you take in all these data points and you're going to be like, well, this black box says yes or no at the end, right? And it's not a human that does it. It just takes in all the data points, of which maybe people would have leaked a lot of information about their personal lives going up to that point. So it's concerning to me when you look at the level of transparency people might be providing over their finances. I think in practice, it's not super significant, or it's certainly not as big as it could be, because at the moment, most, like, cryptocurrencies play money for most people. Like, people aren't using cryptocurrency to actually pay for most of their healthcare needs. People aren't typically getting paid in cryptocurrencies. People aren't doing all these sorts of things that in a holistic system would be the type of, you know, economic activity you would expect if you actually were using this in a widespread way. But it does concern me, the fact that you have so many different opportunities for discrimination along the way. It's just, it is honestly terrifying to me. And I think that people are likely to use it for ill, even if the intent isn't to use it for ill. Like, it will have horrible effects on certain groups.
It can have effects on which, like, people don't even realize that they're using it for real, right? Yeah. Because you would see a lot of well-intentioned but not so smart people make decisions on how others should live or shouldn't live their lives. That you can see how just cut out that translates down into discrimination of a lot of sorts. I mean, you mentioned the HIV test, which is a very good one, but just as with the HIV thing, you would, in your example, know that you didn't get a mortgage because of that. You could very well not even know, like the platform wouldn't even accept you on, and it would effectively keep you outside of the system. Then if decentralized social media becomes a thing, oh, you retweeted him and her, so therefore you're associated perpetually with this circle of people that we don't like, and you're a communist, libertarian, Democrat, Republican, whatever, and that you're not allowed to enter our platforms. That's a very pressing issue that can be built right into the system. And like they say, like, this is money for enemies, right? Or these are tools that you should make for your enemies, not for your friends.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the possible data points that someone would want to have on you before they make like a risk-based decision. And it's important that we're not using those to discriminate against people. It's just, yeah, I don't know. Privacy is very important to help prevent ill, whether purposeful or not. But at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter that much if it's purposeful. All that matters is that these groups are getting discriminated against, you know, and it's horrible. And there are lasting generational effects here in the US based off some of the bank policies that were made. Imagine if this is just not even a conscious decision by an entity you can hold liable. It's now someone writes code that does this and it doesn't even tell you why you're like rejected.
We were talking about artificial intelligence the other day. I had Alan White here, who's a data scientist, and we were talking about this case in which, like, basically someone built an AI tool for human resource management, and turns out the AI became sexist because it would sort of optimize for the type of employee that the company would want, and the company would be predominantly, all the position would be predominantly fulfilled by males. So that's what the AI optimized for. And you would see that, oh, this government app that's built on the blockchain somehow ended up optimizing for people that have supported this government in the past, right? Who knew?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so you talk about like all these, I don't know. I know that you have some people that talk about things like accessibility of loans and how this helps accessibility and helps this and like perhaps, but you need to be really, really careful. And I want to make sure, like, I think that a lot of people in the cryptocurrency space are not typically discriminated against groups. And so I think this isn't very top of mind for a lot of people. And it's important for a variety of reasons that you think about these things and how people may discriminate against certain groups when you're designing a lot of these systems. And I don't know, it's when you take away ways for people to discriminate, there's less likelihood that you can. So privacy is one important tool to help reduce discrimination in those sorts of ways. So I can't speak for how different projects are going to implement privacy in their systems or whatever, but if something plugs into Monero for whatever you're building on the side, at least your interactions with Monero will be as well covered as anything can be reasonably covered today.